What's up, everybody? It is Tuesday at 2 Eastern, not Pacific or Central or Greater Median Time, whatever time zone you're in. It is East Coast, Tuesday at 2. I am your co-host for the show, Rob Mann. With me, I have the incredible bearded wonder, Mr. Tim Walker.
Hey, Rob, you're standing today.
I am. I'm fired up, Tim. Here we
Yeah.
go. All right. So, Tim, today we're going to talk about something that we actually get asked about a lot, I think. And we field questions about this. I've been fielding questions about this more on the vendor side. You had a mix of vendor / actually working at a staffing company, answering and implementing these strategies. And that is, what do top performing Bullhorn customers, meaning the agency, do? What are those 5 things they focus on? So, how did we get into this topic today, Tim? Most importantly,
Yeah, I was actually talking with a customer yesterday, and they brought on some new people. They've got some new leadership, and that leadership really wants to know that they weren't super familiar with Bullhorn. They'd used it a little bit in the past, and they've come in as a new leader into a shop that uses Bullhorn. And they wanted to know, what do you see out there? What do top performing Bullhorn companies, what do they do from a process standpoint? What do they do to really get the most out of Bullhorn, to really hone in on their process, and how can they improve, efficiency, especially from a process standpoint for their on the ground recruiters and account managers, and how can that flow all the way up to the top, right? So jogged put my thinking cap on, made me sort of think about what are those top 5 things maybe that a company does, and of course with your experience as a Herefish OG and long time Bullhorn person. I've done Bullhorn implementations myself, and maybe we could rap about it for a little bit.
you want to rap about it?
No, I mean I want you to rap about it. I'll talk about it.
Actually rap, or
freestyle.
All right, so let's drop a beat, Tim. What do you got? No, I'm kidding. Do not beatbox. All right, let's go to the list.
Okay, let's go. How about we go to the list instead?
There we
go. Okay, top 5 things.
Tim, I have to say, I'm gonna pause you for a second, Tim. I have to say that the music you created for our entrance video, I love and I jam out to every time in the background. People can't see me. So.
Yeah, one of these days we need to put the background as the foreground. We need to have a little
and let me dance to the music coming on. Okay,
maybe a little fade in, a little half opacity. You sort of in the background jamming out as we come
every time. I don't know if Tim laughs at me or not, but I'm jamming out because I can't hear him. Anyway, all right, let's get in here.
Thank you. Okay, number 5. Have a team that evaluates technology and workflows regularly. This is one of your suggestions, Rob. So,
yeah, and this is something that I've learned from Hairfish Bullhorn Automation days, is having a team that discusses new technology, your workflows, what's working, what's not working. And then obviously goes out, does research, comes back with suggestions and deliberates, and then decides what to deliver back to the general population of your company. It's just important to get end users, if there's mid-level management, if there's upper higher level management, C-suite, you got to get them all, some combination of them, in a room together, and be curious about what's making a salesperson or recruiter's day difficult, whether that be the technology that they're working with, or it's the job board, or it's a workflow that this company has implemented that may just not make sense. And whether they can change it or not is one thing, but acknowledging it and then telling everyone, hey, we hear you. It's got to stay the same for a little bit. Maybe we'll change it when we can. But just being heard is super valuable. And I think having this team gets everyone to be heard, gets potential blockers out of the way, gets blockers from adopting new technology out of the way or adopting new workflows out of the way. I'm a huge fan of this methodology of asking people what made their day difficult consistently. I got it from Kat Cole. If you're not familiar with Kat Cole, she went from being a 18-year-old server at a Hooters to running Hooters to turning around Cinnabon and now turning around Athletic Greens. She's been the CEO multiple times. I don't think she has a traditional MBA, but one of the things she preaches when she talks about operationalizing businesses is understanding what made someone's day difficult and going out and fixing it. And my giant nerd self loves the Ted Lasso episode 1, where he, creates the stupid box and asks everyone to tell him what's going on, what issues they have in the locker room, and he ends up fixing the water pressure. And I love that, and I think that's a great business story that no one talks about. So
yeah, so real quick, in your opinion or in your experience, this group that you're talking about, it's not just people up here, right? You need a mix of people throughout the entire organization, recruiters,
people who are curious
sales
and
staff.
invested, yeah, from all levels of the business, all areas of the business. Obviously, try and keep the team small. Maybe create multiple if you can, if it's too big of an org. Just like email marketing, you want to segment it and make sure that it's impactful. But yes, it's not like Tim. Let's be honest. Like Andy, who is the CEO of a staffing company, our CEO of 3IQ as well, doesn't necessarily know what the day-to-day recruiter has to deal with every day anymore. So and that's not a huge staffing company. Imagine if you had 200 recruiters, 300 recruiters, 1,000 recruiters, right?
Mm-hmm.
All of those people to get input because they're dealing with the revenue generating pieces every day.
Yep, I love that idea. Let's see what else we got. So have a well-defined data strategy for internal users.
This one's all you, bud.
It's all me. Okay. Yeah. So I think it's important when we talk about data. So when you set out on this project, and this is what this
What
client.
project?
So when you set out on a project to improve your process, right? So you've got this idea that okay, we need to get the most out of Bullhorn. We really need to use Bullhorn the right way. We want to get all these reports. We want to know top down what's going on. and want to have a really efficient system. My first thought, or the first thing I always say is, that's awesome. That's great. Okay, number one, that's perfect. You should be thinking about that, no matter how big or small you are as a company. Then number two is, let's slow down and let's go back to the beginning, because before you can do any of that, first you need to understand what exactly you want. Let's just take your recruiters, for example. What exactly do you want your recruiters data-wise to be putting into Bullhorn? Because if you haven't thought that through, you're not going to be able to know, what your end result is going to be. Maybe you can work backwards from that end result. Say, hey, I want to be able to track, phone calls, right? Or I want to be able to track some change of status, uncontacted new leads that come into the system, right? So before you can do that, you need to work back down, right? And you need to say, do I need a new status for my candidates to come into the system uncontacted that the recruiter is going to change, or that we're going to eventually use automation to change when there's a note in the system that a phone call has been placed to that candidate. You need to know exactly what you want your recruiters to do. And that also is going to cut down on frustration, because that's one of the biggest momentum killers in this sort of exercise in efficiency, maybe, that you want to go through, is that you keep changing things along the way. So you do one thing, and then a month later you realize that didn't work out. You're going to do another thing.
Oh, yeah.
Eventually, yeah. By that third and fourth time, nobody's going to believe.
Stick with it for at least a quarter or 6 months before you start rethinking yourself. So one of the first things I do, if I was doing a Bullhorn automation consulting gig, whether I'm evaluating your current automations or I'm helping you build a strategy and build out new automations — I haven't really done this recently, but when I was doing it the last couple of years, is I will go and ask you to show me what fields are required for a new candidate, a new contact, a new job, a new company, and then a submission and a placement. What statuses are used, when things change in terms of statuses, what causes the change, can we automate that? How do you get ownership of a candidate? How do you get ownership of a contact? What data is required in a placement? What data is required for a submission? I need to know all of that to help you build out your automation strategy. And so having that well defined will make you so much easier to, number one, work with as you start an automation journey, perhaps, or an AI journey or a reporting journey. But will also greatly increase. And what I think I always forget this is if it's well defined, your team can be trained on it and they can adapt it. And if you keep changing it or don't have it laid out and easy to find and figure out what to do correctly, or just ask them about it randomly, right? Like, hey, you know, you can go in as the leader and see how many submissions each recruiter put in and make sure that they're in. Because if it's not in Bullhorn or it's the ATS, it did not happen. And I actually did not get paid if I was not using Bullhorn on a day-to-day basis. So my commissions would be in jeopardy because if I forgot to put a placement in or put a submission in, I would not get paid. I don't even need to do all that, but just keep in mind that there is a value to keeping the data integrity of your system up, correct, especially with the world of AI that we're living in now. All right, let's move on to number 3. We're taking our sweet time here today.
Yeah, no, and but while I'm moving on to number 3, I'm just going to highlight one thing and say the required field things is something that you sort of passed over, but that's really big, and I think that's something that people overlook. It's a simple thing,
I don't love having a ton of them. I like having like 3 or 4, or no, 3 to 7, depending on the entity. Like company is kind of easy. Obviously, at different stages of a company's life cycle in your business, it might be more important to have more required fields, but usually you can have an internal user update those, like the back roll, the payroll people, to get the pay profiles organized and such. All right.
Yeah.
Organized candidate sourcing workflows. I truthfully don't remember exactly what we were talking about when I wrote the word sourcing workflow. I generally know what this is supposed to be about, so I'm going to pass it to you to start at least.
Okay, so you're hoping that I know what we're talking about. I do,
Yeah,
in fact.
Okay, so
so let's as a transition to this from the last question, you talked about automation, and one of the things that another thing that I always say to people is do it manually first, and then we can automate it later. So if you can do a process manually, then we can figure out.
You have to be able to do it manually, well, and scalable.
Yeah, and so I think a lot of times one of the first automations or one of the first process improvements that people or that organizations make in Bullhorn is candidate sourcing. So whether that's automating maybe how candidates are imported into the system. If you think about it, job boards, is one really simple way or really common way, but there's also automatic sourcing tools, automatic matching tools. If you're using Bullhorn automation, doing candidate outreach, updating profiles, maybe reaching out to them with jobs that are available. Those are all ways that you can use automation to organize and do interesting things with your candidate sourcing in Bullhorn. But you first have to understand how you can do that manually and what processes by which you're bringing candidates into Bullhorn and you're effectively screening them. And I think that first step is really important, because if you're just shoveling new candidates into Bullhorn as fast as you can without a way of being able to categorize and organize them in a way that makes them searchable and findable in the database, what are they in there for?
Well, I think searchable and findable is a great way to say this. Is one of the biggest issues that you will see with people using your database first is if it's not usable. And what that means is, like, you have if someone searches a certain specialty in Bullhorn and candidates show up with no phone numbers or emails, or there's a mix of candidates with no emails and phone numbers with people with emails and phone numbers, you want to display returns to your team with good data. And then if you need to go outsource or figure out a software to go clean up records that you think might be valuable to make use of, you can do that. I would have saved searches on these entities, especially candidates and contacts, that only have data for outbound, or using email marketing, or text marketing. I would not let your team return instances of large pools of candidates in a list view in Bullhorn that don't have a phone number or an email, because that is a tremendous turnoff for adopting that software. So we can walk you through how to do that. It takes like 5 seconds, but anyway.
And that goes back to our first number 5 point here, is that know what fields you want required, know what information you want people to be filling out.
Number 4. Yeah. All right, keep going. We got to get this under 20 minutes. Here we go.
Plan out your candidate and client journey. So we talked about the candidate journey a little bit, but I think what this speaks to more is, I think really successful Bullhorn organizations have a very well-defined and worked out process for moving candidates through the job submission process. So that life cycle per job, and also then by extension clients and what their experience is going from being a lead to a working relationship client.
I think, but I think this one gets a little bit deeper into what and when you want people to hear from you, and what they're going to experience when they do hear from you. So, you can think about, if you take a life cycle of a candidate, and you have the candidate entering your community or database, right? Then you have what that experience is before they maybe even get to being submitted, or if they immediately get submitted, what that experience is as they're going through the submission process. Let's say we place them, whether it's perm or contract, what that experience is before their start date, what that experience is with your brand after. How, like, you put all the effort into getting this person placed perm or contract, and it's probably perm more than contract recruiters who just fall off engaging with these people that you spent a lot of time with and a lot of effort. And that is just the loss of, like, obviously you may not remember, hopefully you're successful, you don't remember all the people you placed, maybe offhand. I probably, I think I do. But the goal would be to use automation or some kind of tool to create touch points that are memorable. Maybe I love, in the SaaS world, we're gifting more now. So we're sending like cookies, or like asking people what they like and sending it. I got Tim a beard massage, beard oil recently. I haven't done that, but I'm gonna do it.
It's in the mail.
Yeah, no, I'm traveling up there tomorrow on Thursday, so I'm gonna have to have a beard oil for you. But anyway, that is really what I'm talking about. It's like, how do you create meaningful moments with that person, and defining, just like you defined how you use the ATS, defining what those are really early, and then measuring the outcomes and the results of how that helps you build relationships and continue to grow. So, all right.
Yeah. Hey, let me add one other thing, because I think it's really overlooked and undervalued, and that is submission statuses. Really recently, I've seen a number of customers of ours that have very, very detailed submission statuses for candidates on jobs. So once you so not just going from submitted to client submitted to interviewing to placed, right? In between, in that submission and client submission stage, having things like, waiting for client approval, or client, or candidate considering this job, or screened and awaiting approval. So things, micro statuses in between, that can really flesh out and define where this candidate is in the journey of a job, so that they don't get lost, and so you don't forget what you need to do about them. So one thing I've just seen recently that I think might help a lot of other Bullhorn users out there. Submitted. Oh, that's number 1. What submitted candidate pipeline?
Yeah, I thought you were joking with me when you didn't.
No, I forgot. I didn't remember what your submitted candidate pipeline, which is something that I've seen a lot of people do recently.
Which we just explained, so we don't need to explain this.
Which we just explained. You wanted to get it under 20 minutes, so I just cut out the transition altogether. But or I've got some premonition here, and I knew that was coming.
Yeah, you're definitely like a character from Dune. You're Frank Herbert's example A of prescience.
You talked about the beard oil, and you got me all
Got you excited, didn't I?
Yeah. No. So to bring it back to the topic, though, I think this is really important, and it allows you to do a lot of things in Bullhorn, even with automation, and when candidates are getting followed up with. If you be really intentional about what statuses you have in there under your submissions, and you can do all sorts of things. And you might sometimes you might need a little bit of help getting it set up because it can be kind of complicated in that submission workflow as far as what triggers what. But you can have different workflow stages in your submissions. You can have submission statuses underneath each of those stages, and they can trigger different parts in your process. And so if you haven't, I would just encourage people to go in and look at your statuses under your submissions, and really think about how you can enhance that process to make things a lot more laid out.
All right, guys, we went over our 15-minute mark. We blew past 20 minutes. At 22 minutes, we've delivered the 5 things top performing Bullhorn users or companies do. Tim Walker, thank you so much, and I will see you on Friday.
Thanks, Rob.